Today, welcome back to creating virtual DOM. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at how to implement virtual DOM part 3. So in part 1, we've taken an HTML and converted that into a virtualized object that can be read in JavaScript. In part 2, we took that object and reconverted it back into a DOM HTML. In part 3, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be building a parser. Basically, we're going to be taking a string that looks like HTML and we're going to be parsing it and returning back an object. That's basically how the JSX transpiler also works. In this video, we're not going to be taking care of nested children. We're just going to be taking care and parsing top level string structure itself. We're also not going to be using regex at all. This is just straight JavaScript code. So with that, let's get started. So for instance, this is frontend.com. And here we're explaining what the question here is. So we're taking a string that looks like this. It resembles a DOM element, and eventually we want to write a function that transforms our string into something like this. So it specifies the opening element, which is the name of A, and closing element, name of A, and the children, which is front end lead, just as like so. So let's get started. So I've already gone ahead and started a boilerplate here, so we don't have to spend time writing some of this code. We're going to focus on 3 main examples here. All 3 here are valid. So the first valid example is a tag with front end lead, no spaces. Second is just an A tag that's blank. Third is a div structure with an attributes, and then we have a children, which is just front end lead. Then we also have a closing div structure. And eventually we're going to return this object. For now, I'm just console.logging the code. And yeah, let's get started. So first and foremost, if we just run this and print out the code, we'll see that it's going to return spaces in the beginning and end. So if I do return code, because we're already doing a console.log here, see we have extra spacing, trailing and leading spaces. So how we can resolve that is we can just say code equals to code.trim. So that will get rid of the leading and trailing spaces. And instead of returning code, I'm just going to do a console.log here directly. Alrighty, so it got rid of the leading and trailing spaces. Now we want to start parsing the opening tag itself. So first, before we do that, we want to first verify if this string is even valid and valid HTML. So one thing we can first do is make sure the first and the last characters, first one is this guy and the last one is this guy. So let's write that out. We'll say if code 0 at index 0 is not equal to this guy, or code.length -1 is not equal to this guy, then we're going to throw new error beginning and end does not start with either this guy or this guy. So let's run this. So looks like we're not getting any errors, but what if I change this to this? Then we get an error. So that's working as expected. So that's one of our base cases. Let's just put this on the next line so it's a little bit cleaner to read. Our second base case we can think about is a valid DOM structure will have equal opening this symbol, and this symbol will, the length of it should equal to itself, the closing length as well. So we can write that out. So we'll say if code.split, split by that character, dot length is not equal to code.split dot length. If this is the case, then we're also going to throw a new error again. This time we'll say unequal lengths for this guy or this guy. And let's just make sure this is working. So if I add an extra one, we get an error. Cool, that works too. Next, we can start focusing on the first opening and opening tag. So we'll first want to parse that out. So we'll say const first opening tag equals to code dot index of the first opening tag. So this is the first opening tag index, so we can just call it index, be a little bit more explicit. And same thing with the first closing tag index, so code.index of the closing one. And then finally, we want to understand all the characters that are inside of it as well. So we'll say const content within first tag equals to code dot slice first opening tag index, and then first close tagging index, and then we can just console.log content within first tag. Let's see what this returns. Cool, so we're getting the content. One thing you'll notice, the slice is including the opening tag character. So we can just say first opening tag index plus 1. That way we'll avoid that particular character, and this should work fine. Cool, we get the first opening tag and until the very end. This is working as expected. The other issue here is we have white space here, so we can just trim this. So we'll say .trim, gets rid of the white space. Awesome. Now what we can do here is we can split this into multiple strings by spaces, because you notice we have a space here before we get to the next attribute. So we'll say .split by space. Cool. So we split it by space. Now we can get the first tag itself. So we'll say const opening tag name equals to content within first tag 0. So this will provide us the opening tag name. And let's just make sure we're getting this as expected. Awesome. For the opening tag name, there's a couple of checks we can add here. Like for instance, if we have a 1 here, it's technically not a valid tag, right? Or if we have a backslash here, it's technically not a valid tag. We'll just focus on those two for now. So we'll say, let's keep it at 1 for now. One interesting way to determine if your string could potentially be a number or contain a number is you can use parse int. So we'll say parse int opening tag name. So yeah, it does parse to a 1. But if you notice, if I just remove the 1, it's going to be an NaN value. So we can use that. So we'll say number.is NaN parse int opening tag name, which is going to be false. We want which is going to be true. It is NaN, so we want it to be NaN. So if what we want to say here is if the number is not NaN, then we want to throw new error opening tag cannot include a number. So let's make sure this works. Oh, I forgot to specify console.log, and the opening tag name now should, let's add a 1 here. And we get an error. Cool. Let's also make sure we can take into account the backslash. So we'll say if opening tag name includes this guy, then again we throw a new error, cannot include a / or backslash. I always get confused between the two. So yes, we get the error perfect. If both of those pass, that should be good enough for opening tag. Now let's worry about the attributes themselves. So here, let's think about this. How can we determine the attributes themselves? So let's console.log content within the first tag, which should be a list of elements. So basically here, we want to ignore the first div. We just want to focus on everything other than the first one. So let's just create a new array here. So we'll call it const atts, which is equal to content within first tag dot splice, and then 1 content blah 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 dot length. And let's just console this out. Cool. So we have ignored the first item. And now in here, what we can do is we'll say dot split split it by the equals. Actually, sorry, we cannot split it because this is technically this is an array, and split only works on strings. So let's do this. Let's say at for each item, and in here we'll say const key val pairs equals to item dot split it here with the equals, and we'll create another constant top here called attributes map, and let's just call it attributes, and let's just open this up. It's a map, and what we'll do here, we'll say attributes key value pairs 0 equals to key value pairs 1, and if we console.log key value pairs here, let's see what we get. Oh, sorry, attributes here. Let's see what we get. Cool. So we got all of our attributes that we care about. Obviously, we can add additional checks here, checking for numbers and so forth, but I think this should be good enough for the problem statement at hand. So let's move back up. So next, we want to worry about, I guess, we can worry about the children first, this guy in here. So let's create a new variable called const children, which by default right now is going to be equal to code. Actually, before we get into children, what might make more sense is to focus on the closing elements first, because basically what we want to do is to get the children context, right? We want to be able to check the index of this guy and get all the content before this index here. That will provide us the children index. So let's write that out. So we'll say const last opening tag index equals to code dot index of, and we'll say, oh, it should be last index of, sorry, last index of this guy. And we'll also just create another one called last closing tag index, and it'll be this guy. And remember, for the opening tag index, we always want to increment by 1. So for the children, it'll be code.slice. The beginning will be the first closing tag index, so this guy. And the last will be the last opening tag index. So let's just make sure this is returning as expected. I think we might have to increment tier 1. Yes, so this is slightly incorrect. So this should be +1, and I believe this should be -1. Cool, yes, it's all working expected here. We got the children. I will just delete this because it's not necessary right now. So now that we've taken care of children, let's worry about validating the closing tag. So we already have the last opening tag, last closing tag index. Now we really need to just get the content within the last opening and closing tag. So it's like const last content within tag, which is code.slice last opening tag index, and then last closing tag index, like so. And let's just console this. In fact, we need to add increment 1 here. So let's see what we get here. Cool, we got the content inside of there, perfect. In here, we notice that we have some white space here to worry about. So let's trim that. So we'll say trim the white space. Now that we got rid of the white space, we still have some space within the characters themselves. Split by spaces, and then we'll do a filter on that list. So we'll say dot filter, and we'll filter everything. So we'll say character char, and we'll say character must have a length. As long as it has a length, we will return it. So we'll see now it'll be a list, but it'll ignore the white spaces. And then we can just, you know what, we can just leave it here for now. So now we have all the characters in the last one. So first we'll say if last content within tag 0 does not equal to this guy / we're going to throw a new error. Closing tag must start off with a forward / like so. Let's just validate this too. So if I go back up and I don't have a / here, we get an error. Perfect. And then lastly, we just want to make sure the last tag are equal to the first tag. So we'll say if last content within 1, which is the tag name itself, does not equal to, and we'll scroll up, we have the opening tag name here. Opening tag name. Then we want to throw a new error. Throw new error. Opening tag versus closing tag mismatch. Awesome. Let's just make sure this is also working. So if I put an A here instead of a div, we should get an error. Perfect. We get an error. And lastly, I think we've taken care of most of our cases. We might have missed something, so we'll take a look at some tests here. But lastly, we want to return things in this format. So opening tag will just be the tag name. In this case, it's not called tag name, it's called opening tag name. So let's just reference that instead. And then we're appending the attributes, which is up here, which is the map. We're spreading it out to the props. And then the children we are providing is saying if there's a children.length, then we're going to return the children as a list. Otherwise, it's going to be an empty list. So I'm getting an error here. Tag name is not defined. Oh, actually, I think that's an old error. Let's do a console.log on parse now. Console.log parse. Awesome. We get our expected output back here. Now, let's test a few things. So first, I am testing this weird case with all these spaces. We've already tested that. Let's test a case with empty tags, so no children. So we get an error. So saying closing tag must start off with a /. So let's take a look at what's happening here. So let's do a console.log on the last closing tag content. So we're just getting a list here. We're getting a list instead of, we're not splitting the list at all. So the error here is that we are doing a slice on the code. We get the opening last content within the tag itself. That's fine. But then we're doing a split on spaces. We're assuming it has spaces. It might not actually have spaces. So there's a better route to take here. So instead of doing a split here and then filtering on empty characters, let's start off by updating our code to have spaces here too. So it's a little bit more obvious, like so. Right? And then let's go back to our line of code. And here we're going to do dot replace. And then we're going to replace all white spaces with nothing. So it looks like so. You notice we get valid data back. But what if instead of an A tag here, we have a div? Well, we get an error at that point. Because for the checking of the last tag, we're just checking last content within the index of 1, which is actually just the character D here. So instead of checking for a character, what we're going to want to do is we're going to have to create a constant called last tag name, which is equal to last content within that tag dot split. We're splitting by this character, and then we're going to go ahead and just join it. And let's just print this out. So now we have what we expect to see. So now we're comparing it by last tag name. And I'm going to get rid of my console.log. And we get our expected output. So now let's just make sure we go through all of our test cases one more time. So we're going to do the first one, which is an A tag. Looks like this. passes. We're going to do our second one, which does not have any children. Also passes. And lastly, we're going to do this one that has a bunch of white space. Okay, we're getting another error. Closing tag mismatch. Let's take a look at why. So actually what I forgot to do is we want to trim white space again. So we'll just do a dot trim here. And this also works now. That's pretty much it. So let's just kind of walk through what we've did one more time. We trim our code. Then we're checking for our two base cases here. The first one is checking for is the first character an opening tag and is the last character a closing tag. The second base case is we're making sure the opening tag and closing tag lengths are the same. Then we're getting all of the indexes for the first opening and closing tag. We get the content within it. Then we get the opening tag name for the first one. We validate that it doesn't have a number or it doesn't have a / inside of it. Then we're building an attributes map where we get the attributes content from the opening and closing first tag. And we're iterating through it and appending to our attributes map. Then we're worrying about the children. So we get the last opening tag index and last closing tag index. Then we create a children constant variable that gets the content within the the first closing tag index and the last opening tag index right here. Once we get the content within it, we want to next focus on the last content. So we'll do a const last content within tag, where we get the content within the last opening closing tag. We are validating to make sure the last content within tag 0 equals to a /. And then lastly, we are grabbing the last tag name, where we're getting the last content within tag and we're splitting it by slashes. Then we join it so it becomes back into a regular string. And then we trim it so we exclude any leading or trailing spaces. Finally, we're validating the last tag name does not equal to the opening tag name. If they're equal to each other, things will work fine. If they're not, we'll throw an error. And lastly, we'll just return our object that we'd expect to see. And that's pretty much it. If you guys found this video helpful, I appreciate pressing the like and subscribe button. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Thank you. Bye.